Okay, so afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for a very special lunchtime webinar today. We've named this one PADS Dads, and it's the often untold story from dads of babies and children with Down syndrome. So we're really grateful for their time because they've volunteered to do this. Well, they were headhunted probably actually to do this, and they're doing that and this in their lunchtime too. So we've got Mark, Adam and Carl, who are going to speak to you in a moment. But just as an introduction, for those of you that haven't joined our webinars before, PADS is under the umbrella national charity Down Syndrome UK. And we not only provide information and support for parents, we also provide training and resources to professionals. So we have a lot of information sharing days for our parents, but also we do training, and these lunchtime webinars are going really well since we started. But we're fully immersed in the lives of people with Down syndrome. We campaign and lobby. This is Nicola Enoch, our founder, and Nicola and I are both part of the National Down Syndrome Policy Group that were fundamental in supporting Liam Fox in the production of the Down Syndrome Act in England. So this is just a snapshot really of what we do. We don't just provide mums and expectant mums, we support dads and expectant dads, but also grandparents and schools. We've got lots of Makaton training courses, and we do various schemes. The most successful ones are Pants for School, our school resources, and we also we developed a network of support groups so that everybody should know about what we're able to provide parents. So in terms of dads, we don't want the dads to be left out of the maternity experience, and so we have a page on our website dedicated to supporting dads. Like I say, we have one for expectant dads. I don't think it's quite as well populated as the expectant mums ones. I mean, these guys will tell you if they've been part of it. But from that, we go on to just an ordinary dads group where once the baby's been born. And this was really successful. This was out in the summer, I think, this year. We did a series of podcasts for dads. This was the brainchild of Ben, I believe, who's a dad of a young chap with Down syndrome, and he thought that maybe this might be a way forward for dads to get advice, and if they were struggling or they needed a bit more help in that, having that diagnosis of Down syndrome, or their baby's just been born with Down syndrome, that this is quite a good place to signpost them to. There's a series of 4 webinars. Carl is actually on one of those webinars, but I've listened to them all, and they're all really very interesting. They're not very long, 30 to 40 minutes. So you do signpost any dads that you've come across to this podcast, because I think it is making a real difference. So I'm going to let the dads speak now. So we're going to start off with Mark, who's dad to Elby. Here he is, and I'm just going to move this on so you can see some lovely pictures. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Lou. Just checking you can hear me all right with everybody joining.
Yep, all good.
Perfect. Cool. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for dialing in. As you probably tell, I'm in work. I'm in the military. I'm in air traffic control in the Royal Air Force. So I'll come back to that a little bit shortly. So I apologise for the background behind me, because there's airfield maps over my left shoulder, which will probably no interest to any of you. So yeah, Albie will be 3 on the 14th of March. So you can see the top left picture when he was relatively new, only literally probably 20 minutes old or so at that point. He's a fabulous little kid. Him and my wife, his mother, Carla, absolutely love him. As you can tell in the middle picture, he likes to sleep on you, so that's always fun if you need a nap. I'll go this slide first, and you'll see kind of my bullet points. Now, they all seem a bit doom and gloom, and absolutely they're not meant to be. There's good points, there's bad points, which we'll come to. Sorry. Points to note, I should say, is what we use in the military. So Carl and I, we knew very early about Albie's diagnosis of Down syndrome. We did all the relevant tests, all the invasive stuff early in the pregnancy when we knew there was a potential. In no way, shape or form did that dictate what was going to be our decision. We'd already made the decision kind of we don't mind if it's, oh, sorry, that's the wrong way to say it, but we didn't care if it was Down syndrome. It didn't make a difference to us. It was still going to be our beautiful little boy or girl, because we didn't know until he was born. What I think is one of the only true surprises left in the world. So we didn't know. We did the tests. We got informed that Albie had Down syndrome over the phone initially, which is the way we were told. And from that, we then got an appointment literally the next day back in Bristol, was where I was at the time, at Southmead Hospital. So we went back in the next day to have a conversation with the doctors, the consultants, just to chat through everything, which was fine. Obviously, initially a little bit of a shock, despite all we knew it could be a potential. But the key thing for me is the top bit on the slide. The very first words that came out of the doctor's mouth when we walked in the room was, "I'm very sorry for your diagnosis." And I hope you can appreciate that's not only unhelpful, it's absolutely heartbreaking for a parent to hear that. It's just, in my opinion, a completely wrong use of terms, because there's nothing to be sorry about. We knew about it. And it's just a plea that if you get into this situation, just be very careful with the way you phrase things, because it took a lot of the gloss off initially what we were still excited about, because the night before had been quite challenging. Lou, I think somebody's struggling with comms in your chat. So yeah, it's really challenging. And kind of the night before had been a bit tearful, a bit worried. What's next? What's the process? We don't know. But by the time we came to the doctor the next day, we were really positive, and that kind of took the gloss out of it. The other bit is the 9 out of 10 is, I couldn't possibly tell you how many times we got told within the next few weeks, 9 out of 10 people that get the diagnosis this early will terminate. And again, that's just really unhelpful. We told the doctors really, really early, we don't care, we know it's Down syndrome. There were no other extenuating circumstances in terms of Edwards, Passau's, etc. And we were happy with where we were, and we didn't want to change anything. A lot of the time, it's just keep it simple, keep it plain English, plain language. I know I'm bad for that in the military, that I talk in abbreviations that blow people's minds, so I get it. But sometimes just keeping it really, really simple and not going into really scientific or medical terms just makes life easier. We were able to pick or name who we wanted to be as our key doctor and sonographer throughout the rest of the pregnancy, and all the scans and all the tests, etc. And he was absolutely fabulous. Apologies, I cannot remember his name. I have to double check. But I've never seen a guy that was more empathetic, friendly, just put things in plain English, kept us informed throughout, and made sure I was involved. Because there's a lot of times for various appointments, etc., where Carla had to go in because it was obviously the end of COVID, and I just sat there going, I don't really know what's going on. And Carla would back brief me as best she could, but her head was on fire with what's going on, with all this good stuff. And then I just felt like I couldn't really help her as much as I would like. So whilst the doctor's really, really good at that side, from the other medical professionals, it's just don't forget there's a dad involved as well as the mum. Next slide, please, Lou. And the top bit there kind of relates to what I've said earlier. Is we put in very early post the diagnosis that we aren't going to terminate. There's no change in that. We are content with where we are. And every time we went in for various scans, appointments, we always got asked, have you considered termination? Or a number of doctors go, well, yeah, they call us in for a chat and they wouldn't really understand what we were there for. And then they'd open the notes and go, Down syndrome. And it's like, and I absolutely appreciate everybody's really, really busy. But please just try and read the notes in advance and understand exactly what we were wanting, because constantly getting told, have you thought about termination? Have you considered this? Despite it explicitly saying in the notes, please don't ask us, is just really, can be downheartening. So signposting, Lou's mentioned it, the website for PADS. We were given a card very early on about Down syndrome for a different charity. For the life of me, I cannot remember what it was, but I remember being given it, and the lady in question kind of said, hey, this is all to do with Down syndrome. I don't really know that much about it, but there's apparently stuff on the website. Again, that meant we had to do with background digging, and we kind of stumbled along PADS quite early, and I can't speak highly enough about how amazing PADS are and what they do. You can see top left there, that was me in October at the Cardiff Half Marathon. I ran 3 half marathons in 4 weeks to raise some money for pads this summer, because I'm a fitness idiot. But that's just because they've been so supportive to Carla and I and what we do that I want to pay something back. And I say the last point there is, if you don't know what to do or who to signpost, speak to Lou, speak to the pads team. If you know a family locally that's got a child with Down syndrome, speak to the family and they'll probably know where to signpost and help, because I can't honestly vouch for pads enough. And the last bit from me before I hand over is the military life. You can see that top right, there's Albie looking very proud in his little soldier uniform with me in my RAF uniform recently at remembrance parades. Conscious that he's sitting on my head in the other photo, which I find hilarious. Military life is great, but as you may or may not know, we move around every few years, particularly as an officer. I move around every 2 or 3. So we're constantly getting pulled from pillar to post, from medical centre somewhere else, a medical centre up at where I am now in Shropshire. And the biggest challenge is when we transfer across, we tend to go to the bottom of the pile, despite it not being my fault that the military need to move me around for job prospects. So it's just that plea to make sure when the notes get transferred or whatever it is, to highlight the fact that it's a military family. I've got a very supportive medical centre here, but initially trying to get into some of the stuff with Shropshire was really challenging. And us trying to fight, say, look, we were along this point of the scale and we feel like we've gone backwards, if that makes sense. I think that's it from me. And I say, last point is, pads are fabulous. You guys, medical, I've got the utmost respect having worked with you during the COVID team. So thank you for all you do. And obviously, I'll wait to the end for multiple questions, I'm sure. Thanks, Lou.
And thank you. That was really, really informative. So yeah, if we get through our dad stories, then we should have time at the end if anyone's got any questions. So thank you for that. So we're going to move on to Carl, who is a dad to Orson, who has Down syndrome. So over to you, Carl.
Hi everyone. It's been a while since I've done one of these, but good to be doing one for this. So I'm dad through surrogacy, with my husband Nick, who's the other man in the photo, if anyone was wondering. And we are dads to Orson, who was born with Down syndrome, and his younger brother Felix, who is typical. Orson turns 3 in February, and Felix is 1 in January as well. So we've got a bit of a busy household at the minute with the age of them. So for us, we never wanted to find out during the pregnancy. The indicator at the 12-week bloods came back with a sort of a just under a high chance. In hindsight, if we'd looked at it in a bit more detail, we probably would have thought we probably will have Down syndrome when he's born. But during the pregnancy, it didn't really matter to us. We just wanted to continue with the pregnancy, focused on our friend Gemma, who was helping us have a start a family. But there were some indicators during the pregnancy, sort of like high levels of fluid and things, which it might have been better had we had the diagnosis and could have better managed some of the additional scans we had to go for, because there was always that kind of question mark over the pregnancy about what was causing some of the say issues, but not really issues, but some of the factors that they couldn't put an answer to without that. Then 4 weeks early, all of a sudden, Orson decided that it was time to make an appearance. This was during one of the lockdowns. I think it was the second or the third one. And he was 4 weeks early, born via emergency section. So cue us scraping snow off the car with about 20 minutes notice from Gemma to say, it's happening now, get down. We live in Newcastle, Gemma lives in York, so we never got down to York as quick since. But the team were kind of brilliant from the second we literally burst through the doors. They understood our situation as a surrogacy arrangement anyway, and they let us in virtually straight away to see Orson once we'd been in to see Gemma. And they were really good, that first team that we met, and helped us understand what happened during the emergency arrival. Orson needed resus breaths. So it's quite like a high pressure, sort of stressful situation, and that kind of stayed with us for a while afterwards. Orson spent 2 weeks in Skiboo, but the team on Skiboo were really supportive of us, being 2 dads and just as new parents as well, supporting us to bond with and care for Orson. Really focused on kind of a family-led approach, which is great. The team, we were outstanding, and we've made everyone laugh when the first time my husband Nick had to change one of the nappies, and it was a classic newborn nappy, and he was just try not to gag on the smell and things, and everyone in the room was laughing. And there's like an ease with the staff there, which was great. They were really good at keeping us updated on what had happened sort of through the night and stuff, where if on certain nights we weren't able to stay with Orson, they let us know what was happening. Certainly in the beginning. Then about a week or so after he was born, we had an echo scan. And maybe naively not realising that's just something run of the mill that they do, but we didn't know what they were looking for. We just assumed everything would be okay. And then the doctor kind of took us to one side and said, there's a large hole in Orson's heart. And he helped us understand what that meant in terms of needing surgery at some point. But we didn't necessarily have like the information to hand to know that that was quite common in children with Down syndrome. But when we were discharged from SCIBU, all the necessary referrals had been made to sort of heart surgery specialists and the team up at the Freeman in Newcastle, which is where Orson went on to have a surgery as well. But at that time, we didn't really get signposted to any sort of support groups about sort of children with heart surgeries and things like that. So once we left the hospital, we did feel a little bit alone in that sense. And just sort of generally about our experience while we were in SCIBU, what could have been better for us during that time there was a main consultant. I think she was one of the paediatric consultants working in SCIBU at the time. When telling us about Orson's diagnosis of Down syndrome, there wasn't an approach to sort of sensitivity with the topic. It was heavily focused on sort of the physical markers that could be seen. And when we'd replied that didn't really matter to us, and Down syndrome wasn't going to be an issue for us, the doctor was quite insistent that he would have Down syndrome, and we'd have to wait for the genetic testing that would definitely prove it. And it was almost as if our sort of sense of it doesn't make a difference to us was being treated as like us being naive as parents. In hindsight, maybe there was a bit of naivety there about what it all meant for the future. But I think also from our perspective, we didn't feel as though we were being heard or seen from what it meant to us at that time. Later on in our seeing SCIBU, the same doctor asked if she could bring in some student doctors to observe Orson, and we thought it was going to be sort of about health elements, sort of the heart condition which had been diagnosed, and Orson being on tube feeding for a short time. And they kind of came straight in, and it didn't really give us much time to think about what this meant or what was happening. And we had to sort of watch from an aside, quite stunned as they sort of identify the physical markers of Down syndrome in our son. He was just over a week old. And I think that was probably the hardest part of our stay in SCIBU. We've sort of felt like that approach was done without concern for us or Orson's feelings. And I think I mentioned the stressful period before. I think as a new parent, being in that intense situation, that environment after emergency arrival, our stress levels were quite high, and we didn't have that clear space for sort of thinking things through. I think as great as the team were, I think it would have really helped us at the time if someone had perhaps tried to advocate a little bit for us in that situation. Maybe one of the nursing team buying us a few minutes to think things over, because I think some of the team were as shocked as we were that the doctors had come in and were just going, oh look, well, here's the toe gap, and here's the eyes, and here's the bridge of his nose, and quite painful for us as parents to watch someone sort of point those things out in your newborn. The other thing which could have made the experience better for us in terms of SCIBU was we worked really hard to get Orson off the NG feeding tube, and on one of the nights when we had to leave, a nurse had put the feeding tube back in without consulting us. And again, that just felt a bit sort of disheartening, because within a few hours of us arriving back the next day, a different nurse on a different shift had taken the tube out again, and it just felt as though things were done perhaps without consideration for our wants as well as Orson's. But aside from that, everything that the team were providing for us when we were there and with Orson was absolutely outstanding. We couldn't have asked for a better team. I think one sort of final thing that would have made it brilliant for us would have been if, because we at the time didn't have an awareness of PADS and Down syndrome UK and things like that, would be if someone on the post-birth team had been able to share some positive stories with us, or advise us perhaps on the support that's available to parents. Because we know now that there is so much support out there. for expectant and new parents of children with Down syndrome. We were signposted to one association, but we didn't hear anything back after leaving Screw. And so throughout Orson's open heart surgery and his recovery, we didn't know anything about pads. And it wasn't until Orson was nearly 7 months old that we made contact with other parents of children with Down syndrome. And Orson's now thriving, and we've got such great support from pads, and the postnatal team and the nursing scheme really did do everything they could to support us and two new dads sort of to bond and care for Orson. You can see on the pictures there on the right hand side, that's Orson on his first family holiday with us last year. And those pictures in the middle are us at our print order, because through surrogacy you have to apply for a print order. That was Felix's print order this year, but the two ladies at the top, Gemma is in the blue dress, she carried for us, she carried Orson and Felix, and that's her daughter Abby. And on the other side is Orson enjoying his first Christmas in 21.
Excellent. Thanks, Carl. I'm loving these pictures of all these beautiful babies. I hope you are as well. I'm loving them. Thank you. Thank you for that. That was really interesting as well. You know, a different side because of the surrogacy. So thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to now pass on to Adam, but Adam's got his own slides. So I'm going to stop sharing, and hopefully Adam's going to pick up and share his slides. I've stopped sharing, haven't I? Yeah. Yay. I love it when it works. So over to you, Adam.
Everyone can see my slides now. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, amazing. So I took it quite literally that I was going to tell a story. So this is sort of coming in, starting almost 2 years ago. So just quick introduction of myself. So that's me on the left with my daughter Erin. In the middle we have my other daughter Imogen, who's a super proud big sister. And then on the right, my lovely wife, better half, Steph. So yeah, the story sort of starts pretty much 2 years ago to the day, mid-December 2021. Steph was 8 months pregnant at the time. She had an elective C-section booked in at the start of January, so everything was sort of calm. And then the new Omicron variant came, and I tested positive around about 13th or 14th of December. Steph didn't have a particularly good time with Imogen's birth, so we were sort of hoping this one will be a bit more calm and predictable. So for me to get COVID within a few weeks of the due date was panicky for her at the very least. I think she was very worried that I was going to not be allowed to be with her at the birth, and she spent a very nervous following 10 days until I eventually tested negative on Christmas Eve, the morning of Christmas Eve, and then Steph promptly, almost as she saw the COVID test, then went into labour, and we rushed off to North Middlesex Hospital, having drafted in Steph's brother Peter, that's him on the right there, to come and look after Imogen. So the plan was that our families would have come down over Christmas and helped us out, but because I was testing positive, we couldn't do that. So we rushed off to the hospital, and Steph got taken into the maternity ward, and I was left in the waiting room because, again, during COVID, I wasn't allowed in. And it wasn't really how I expected to spend my Christmas Eve, sat around for hours in a waiting room. At one point, I did wonder if Steph had already had the baby and no one had told me. I'd been in that room so long, but eventually I did get called in, and Steph was wheeled off into the delivery room. And yeah, it was another relatively stressful birth for Steph, unfortunately, that things started to move quite quickly. She was asked to push before the epidural had been offered. I don't think she'd even had any gas and air at this point. And the sort of professionals in the room was sort of saying things like, "Oh, baby's not comfortable," and things were beeping, and it was obvious things weren't quite going to plan. So eventually they said they were going to take her into theatre to try and get her out with Von twos, and they were going to resort to a C-section if that failed. So Steph was wheeled out of the room, and I went to follow her, and they said, "Oh no, sorry, you can't come just yet. You need to wait. You need to wait." So I was back on my own, waiting again, wondering what was happening. Again, quite a lot of time passed. Again, I wondered whether the baby was being born without me. But eventually I was called in, given some scrubs, taken into theatre. And yeah, I didn't really have much interest in looking at what was happening down the business end. So I stayed behind the curtain. And eventually, I think it was the anaesthetist who said, "Oh, baby's out," and a flood of relief just sort of waved through me until about 30 seconds later, when I realised I couldn't hear Erin. I was like, "Hold on, is this good?" And Erin hadn't been brought to Steph and I either, so I started panicking again, thinking, "Oh, something bad must be happening here." Turns out that she'd been moved to the other side of the room to be given some oxygen, and maybe a few seconds later, I could hear her screaming. I was, "Oh, thank God!" At least I can hear her now. And so I was called over to join Erin, and she was sort of pinned down on one of these tables, hooked up to this monitor. And I'm a bit of a science geek, so I'm looking at this monitor, and my initial reaction was, "Oh, I wonder what this is measuring, and I wonder what a good number would be." It looks like oxygen levels, maybe it's blood oxygen levels, and the number was something like 75. Probably 100 would probably be a good number. So I start watching this number, and as I'm sort of daydreaming, thinking about that, it starts to drop again: 60, 50, 40, 30, 20, 0, and everything's beeping. And I look up at the nearest person. I'm just about to start saying, "Oh, what's going on here?" And she looked at me and goes, "Oh, you've just knocked the monitor off her finger. You just need to put it back on." I was like, "Okay, sorry about that." So eventually we got taken off to the ICU. So during the birth, I think Erin had potentially not had as much oxygen as possible. So I think they were doing some tests on the umbilical cord, the gas tests, I think they're called. And then they wanted to take us to ICU just to sit there while they ran the follow-up test. So I finally got to sort of settle down with Erin and take in how cute a thing I'd just created, which was lovely. And eventually a consultant came in maybe about half an hour later to say that they'd done the repeat tests, all the repeat tests were fine, everything was now normal, and we could go back to where Steph was recovering after the birth. And I said to the consultant at this point, "Oh, do you have any like long-term concerns after what's happened to Erin?" And she said, "Oh, I'll come and speak to you later when you've settled down with your wife." And I thought, well, that sounds ominous, but I was looking at Erin, she seemed really calm, really happy. So I sort of put it out of my mind. And we went down to find Mum, and she was very tired, but obviously delighted to be reunited with Erin. She'd lost a lot of blood during the birth and was on a drip for transfusion, and she looks quite happy in this picture, but I think she really rallied to try and get one nice picture because she really was very, very tired at this point. So true to her word, that the consultant came back to visit us, and she brought a junior doctor with her, and she said, "Oh, how are you doing? Yeah, all fine." And she said, "Oh, does Erin have a family resemblance?" And we were like, "Well, actually, yeah, we were just talking about that. Yeah, she looks just like Imogen when she was born." And we're like, "Oh, well, we've noticed that she might have characteristics of Down syndrome." And we were just stunned, just completely flabbergasted. Like, there was nothing that happened within the pregnancy, nothing we'd seen after she was born that made us think anything was wrong whatsoever. And yeah, the consultant then sort of said, "Oh, there'll be a genetic test that will confirm this. So we'll take a blood sample." And eventually that they left the room, and we were sort of left contemplating what that meant for us. So yeah, I think that the first thing, so this is a comparison of Imogen and Erin when they were born, our two daughters, and it is a bit of a spot the difference competition. So that was sort of one of the first things we did after they'd left the room. Was like, are we kidding ourselves? Did our daughters look the same? And we were sort of flicking back through our phones to find pictures of the two of them. But once the dust had settled, after the consultant had left, there was sort of 1,000,001 questions going through my mind, and I don't know whether it's because I have a bit of a science background, or whether I knew that my wife would be the kind of control freak type who'd want to know exactly what was going on. But I very much went into sort of information gathering mode. So we knew we were going to be in hospital for at least another few days while Steph sort of recovered and Erin had various tests done. So I spent most of that time on my phone Googling everything I could find regarding Down syndrome. And I think the first question that I was trying to answer is, well, what is it that the doctors did see in Erin that supposedly means that she may have Down syndrome? And when you Google these kind of things, you get a variety of responses. Some of these sort of cute things, like the one on the left, and sort of very cartoonish, the horrible representations on the right. But it did give us a bit of an indication as to what it is that they'd picked up on. I suppose that one of the takeaways from this would be that the way in which information is presented to parents does matter, and if things are presented in a neutral, positive way, it has a much better impact than if presented in a negative way. So the next thing that went through my mind was, gone too far, was what does it mean for Erin to have Down syndrome? What do we need to look out for as parents? And you can probably Google 1,000,000 different impacts on children in having Down syndrome medically. The vast majority are relatively minor. So some are pretty major, like heart problems, as we heard earlier. But the positive is that almost all of these issues can be resolved or helped with therapies, and we didn't really appreciate that at the time. I think it seems very overwhelming just to know that children might have eyesight problems, hearing problems, problems with their heart, problems with the digestion. But I think as we've gone through our journey with Erin, we've started to realize, like I say, that most of these things you can get on top of. And it is just a matter of how good the support you get is as to how good the outcome is for your child. And then the last question we were trying to answer was, well, what does it mean for us? What's going to be the impact on our lives of having a child with Down syndrome? And there's a very famous essay called "Welcome to Holland," which we stumbled across, which is very poignant. And the gist of that is that there's a family and that they're off to France on their holidays, and through circumstances that are out of their control, they end up going to Holland instead. And whilst Holland is equally nice and equally enjoyable, it wasn't where they thought they were going. And of course the point of the essay is that life may take you down a road you didn't think you were going to go down, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad road. And that's definitely, I think, how we felt when the dust had settled regarding Erin's Down syndrome, that we'd ended up on a path we didn't think we were going on, but it's still a very enjoyable path. So looking back at our time in hospital, we were actually really grateful for most of the interactions we had with all of the professionals and staff, because as I said, we were in there for a good 4 or 5 days after Erin was born. So I got a lot of opportunities to try and quiz people who walked in the door, the unfortunate people who walked in our door and got barraged with questions. But we were very fortunate. People were very careful with their language. We weren't told I'm sorry or asked any awkward questions. And we were very appreciative of that. In actual fact, I think most people were very helpful indeed. And I probably should shout out explicitly to the consultant, who's Dr. Vicky Jones of North Mid Hospital, who actually gave us her personal phone number and email address at the time. And we did tap her up quite a bit, even after we'd come out of hospital. Also want to reiterate, as the other dads have, what an amazing resource PADS is. It really is sort of the place to go for information for new parents of newborn children with Down syndrome. Lots of information about the medical issues, a lot of information about support for both sort of mental side of things and support for the children themselves as they grow older. Some of the development classes and things that they hold are really amazing. And I suppose that the final thing I want to say is that all of the worries that we probably had regarding Erin when she was first born, really haven't borne out in reality at all. So, we did worry, would she be able to go to nursery? And that picture on the left is her at nursery playing with her friends. In actual fact, most of the key workers at nursery sort of fight over who gets to look after Erin because, she's just so cute. We thought ourselves, would we be able to go on holidays anymore? And you can see there's Erin in the middle, absolutely loving life by the pool, climbing all over a plastic flamingo. And we wondered, would Erin make friends? So the person right there, that's Emma Bunton, Baby Spice, who Erin somehow managed to make friends with. And yes, everyone seems to be Erin's friend, which is amazing. And I threw this one in as a bonus. This was actually yesterday, her audiology appointment, where she passed her audiology test for the first time. So she actually has normal levels of hearing now. And she's celebrated by trying to destroy the poor woman's computer. That's the last slide I had. So
thank you. Thanks, Adam. Right, so I'm going to, I think, oh, hang on a minute. I'm just going to count. I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully that's gone back to my screen, has it?
Not yet.
Can you see my screen, or can you not?
Not yet, Lou.
Not yet, okay. I didn't think that looked quite right. Thank you. Okay, so we now have a little bit of time for questions if anybody's got any questions. Let me just reiterate, thank you to all of those dads to say that, PADS is working for them. We really know that as an organisation, we are making a difference. So do contact us if you haven't got our resources. We're trying to get our resources into all hospitals, and get in contact with us because we do provide the Nobody Told Me book for free to maternity units. The Little Orange Book of Knowledge is something that we generally give to goes via the local Down syndrome support groups. But we do have a close Facebook group for professionals, maternity professionals. If you didn't know about that, do look that up. And the only other thing I want to tell you before we see if we've got any questions is the website is there. Our website can be translated into all languages, so I think it's making a real difference there. And I think, for once, we have, as a parent, all of the information that you would need is in that one place, which I think is really working for parents. And just to let you know that you should have been sent something like this, or you will be in the future, in the next couple of days, is the schedule for our webinars next year that we've worked out so far. The first one is what can PADS do for you in 2024. We're going to update you on, we've got a few new schemes coming in, and we have a resident speech and language therapist specialist as well. So there's a few new things that we could tell you that we're doing and how best to support your families.